Okay, pursuant to chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and board members, the meeting hearing will not be suspended or terminated if tech problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. Welcome, welcome. We're having a joint meeting with various entities here. Mike, did you need to bring your group to a?
Thank you very much, Betsy. I'd like to call the meeting of the select board to order as well, and do a roll call vote. Go ahead.
Amy, I.
Right, aye.
What am I voting on?
Mike, aye. That were present.
Okay. Do you have somebody that's on there? So that's just the
No,
four
that's
of
what I
you?
just asked.
Okay, so from now on, we're not gonna do roll call if you have to do anything unless we've got a remote thing
Yeah.
going there.
You have one remote.
Oh, we do? I do, yeah. Okay, well, we're
Well,
toast.
so there you go.
We're toast. All right, great. Why don't we do this? We have a number of folks here.
That's it, I'm sorry, I'm Steve Gant, I'm the chair of the working
They
group.
And I was just gonna say we were gonna go around there and introduce ourselves.
Oh,
You
but-
have to
yeah,
open
we have-
So you have to open
we
yours.
have a forum, yes.
You go.
Yep, thank you. So I'd like to call to order the MBTA Communities Working Group in the town of Duxbury. And so, not pursuant to any particular law, we're appointed by the select board. And I will issue a motion to convene. So, do I have a motion?
All right, so moved.
Thank you.
Double take it.
Second, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good.
Cool.
Convene.
Do I have anybody else that has to open a meeting? All right, cool. What we'll do is just for the sake of everybody having, we don't have name tags here. And I would also, if there's room here and the, folks that are back there, I see our moderator, I see members of fiscal advisory, please join us if it's more comfortable for you to hear or participate by coming to the table. You don't have to sit in the cheap seats. Okay, so why don't we start, Mary, and we'll just go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Good evening, my name is Mary McKinnon, I'm the town's finance director.
Kathleen Glenn, Finance Committee.
Betsy Sullivan, Noisy Finance.
Ed Flynn, ditto.
Weiler, FinCom.
J.R. Kent, FinCom.
Al Hogan, FinCom.
Sean Dawson, Sean Foley, FinCom.
Chuck Wilbur, FinCom.
Mike Holden, Fiscal Advisory. Rainey Reed, Town Manager.
Nancy O'Connor, Executive Assistant to this guy.
Jack Carpenter, Planning Board, Working Group.
Steve Gant, Working Group.
Mike McGee, Chair of Select Board.
Brian Glenn, Select Board and Working Group.
Amy McNabb, Select Board.
Cindy Last, your meeting select board.
Allison Shane, Working Group.
Okay, great. Welcome, welcome.
Up there.
No, we're not, no. If they're up there, they're good.
All right.
Yeah, all right, so perfect. We are going to convene. Mary, did you want to start us off here or did we gonna start off with these gentlemen over here?
We're gonna start right off with the MBTA working group.
All right, very good,
If I may, you all have copies of the warrant as the order will follow.
Thank you.
right? Welcome to the show.
Gary, your driver?
I can, yes, for sure,
That would be
unless you want Allison to.
I like.
Go for it.
I'll start it off, yes. So again, I'm Steve Gant, I'm the chair of the MBTA Communities Working Group. And so we put a presentation together here to go through the work that we put together. We'll introduce the maps and the bylaws that we just recently finalized. And then give you some background on the MBTA Communities process that was only the, so this is the cover page. So here's our agenda. Again, we'll go through a quick overview. We'll do a zoning bylaw overview and map and site characteristics. I'll do the overview. Allison will do the overview and the site characteristics. Doug will be talking about infrastructure implications, and then we'll take questions at the end. Okay, so wanted to start first here. So this is a general timeline that we have of the MBTA communities process. So it all started back in January 14th of 2021. When Governor Baker signed that the Economic Development Bond Bill. And it included changes to that's been the last chapter 40A. And that's what brought the MBTA Communities Act into being. Some key points here, this is the act, at the outset it established 177 cities and towns as MBTA communities. And then it also allows a simple majority, this is a big change, it allowed a simple majority of the municipality's legislative body to adopt an amendment to the zoning bylaw that allows multifamily housing as of right in an eligible location. So previously, you needed a 2/3 majority to make a change to a zoning bylaw. This, if you're adopting a multifamily housing, if you're opting to allow multifamily housing as of right, it's only a simple majority vote by the municipality. And then we adopted the 3A communities provisions that I'll talk about in just a little bit. On January 29th, they offered some preliminary guidance. Again, that was as of right requirement. They allowed 10% affordability and 8% of AMI. That was another feature that they issued in this preliminary guidance. They adopted a concept known as reasonable size. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. And there's a formula that you establish in order to figure out what is reasonable size that the municipality is required to establish. On December 15th of 2021, they issued draft guidance for the public to comment on. About 3.5 months later, they closed the comment period. They got about 400 comments. And that really informed a lot of the other guidelines that were published later on. August 10th, they published some guidelines as well. And they established a website with a lot of information and resources. In October, they revised the guidelines again. They made a lot of revisions to the guidelines during the course of this whole exercise. In October, they revised the guidelines to allow inclusionary zoning over 10% of the units with the supporting feasibility analysis. We'll touch on that a little bit more as we get into it. But what that means is initially when they issued the law, they said that you could zone for up to 10% of the units, to require up to 10% of the units be affordable at or below 80% of area median income. And on October 21st, they allowed you to go over that up to 20%, provided that you had you provided a supporting feasibility analysis. Again, we'll touch on that a little bit later. In November of 2022, they published a compliance model. This is a model that towns and cities and consultants can use, and almost all of them have. Use this compliance model where you have, because it's very technical, how you figure out all the different requirements for unit capacity, where things can be located and such. So they issued this compliance model, and that's when people could really, cities and towns could really get down to the business of figuring out what they could model for their communities, and make sure that they would be compliant when they approve them, or when they voted to approve them. January 31st, 2023, that was the deadline for submitting the action plan. So it's like a preliminary compliance plan that every city and town had to submit. Duxbury did that. We got ours in shortly before the deadline. We submitted it to the state reviewed it, and they approved it. So we were in compliance for having submitted the action plan. And now the final deadline that we have is December 31st of this year. And then on August 17th, they once again revised the guidelines so that they're allowing mixed use, a mixed use district within the districts. You'll see that in the map that we're going to talk about. And that's allowed to offset about 25% of the total unit capacity in the district. And they also specified some additional grant programs. There are penalties that go along with non-compliance. And so here they added another 13 grant programs that the state can revoke or make a town or a city ineligible for if you're not compliant with the MBTA communities law. We'll see those in just a little bit. So again, what is an MBTA community? A lot of you are probably familiar with this. There are 4 categories. One is rapid transit, so that's the blue bits right there, pretty much right around Boston. Commuter rail communities, so those are the dark green communities there. Sorry, there are 12 of the rapid transit communities, 71 commuter rail communities, again, the dark green. Adjacent communities, so that's the light green, so that's kind of the lighter green communities here. That's what Duxbury is, we're an adjacent community, and we'll touch on that in just a minute. And then adjacent small towns, and there's 35, and those are the yellow communities there. And all in all, there's 177 of them. So what category you fall into, is gonna affect your compliance deadline, where you can put where you can put your districts, that you're zoning for, and what reasonable size is. And again, Duxbury is what's referred to as an adjacent community. We're adjacent because we're adjacent to Kingston. Kingston hosts the commuter rail station, so that's why we get the adjacent community designation. So again, so here are the four categories. These are straight out of the guidelines that the state published. So rapid transit community, again, we are not three of these, we're only one, but it's helpful for context really to understand what each of these is. So a rapid transit community, you have to have a rapid transit station within your municipality or within a half mile of the border of your municipality. And you have to have 100 or more acres of developable land in proximity to the station, or stations if you have more than one. The commuter rail community is down here. So that's a community that has a commuter rail station in it, or again, is a half mile, within a half mile of that commuter rail station. And then again, 100 acres or more of developable land in proximity to the station. Adjacent community, that's blue, of course, that's us. So we're an MBTA community that, again, we have 100 acres of developable land. And the zoned areas, now they don't have to be in proximity to a transit station, because of course we don't have one, and we're not within a half a mile of one. So that gives us more flexibility with respect to where we can put the districts that we're zoning. And then you have an adjacent small town. They would typically have less than 100 acres of developable station land, or station area, and a population density of less than 500 persons, or fewer than 700 people. As published by the census. So those are the four categories that you have among the 177. Thank you. So here are some of the basic requirements. We have to have a zoning district, and when we say zoning district, we're not talking about just one area. The district comprises all of the areas, if you're doing more than one, that we would zone for this particular purpose. So we have a district where multifamily development can be built as of right. You can't require a special permit to develop the multifamily housing in these districts. And it's not otherwise subject to any discretionary local zoning approval. This really has to be by right. So what we have in the bylaw really sets the rules for what can develop in this particular district. You have to have a minimum gross density of the units of at least 15 units per acre. So Duxbury's objective here, we set the 15 units per acre as a maximum, but it's also a minimum, so we're basically meeting right at that 15 units. And then what that means is that, because we have two districts, then you'll see them, we zone them to different densities. One is a little bit higher, one is a little bit lower, but on average, they have to come out to an average of 15 units per acre to comply. And now that density is also subject to certain natural limitations, limitations that would be provided by or imposed by the Wetland Act or by Title V, for example. The housing that you're zoning for has to be suitable for families with children, so you can't have any age restrictions. The state thought about that, and they thought that would be a way for people to gain the systems. They said no age restrictions. No bedroom limitations. You can't limit the number of bedrooms that units have or the size of the bedrooms. And you can't have any occupancy caps. In other words, you can't limit the number of people who would be living within a particular unit. You have to establish a minimum land area for Duxbury. In our case, it's 50 acres or more. And then the unit capacity, that's determined by what the zoning allows. Then the requirements based on the community category. Again, one of those four categories, we're an adjacent community. So it's based on that as well. And then the existing housing units that you have in your community. Great, thank you. So here's where we're at. So here's where kind of we intersect with FinCom. So we talked about the types of grants that at risk for Duxbury. One of the key guidelines that the state has issued is they say if a town is not compliant with the MBTA communities law, you cease to become eligible for grants from the state of various types. And you can see There we go, okay. So the big one, right now, I'll list another one in just a minute, is the coastal zone management resilience money that we got, the $2 million that was for beach nourishment. And then we have the Seaport Economic Council, and these are obviously a lot smaller, but there's still grants that we would not be receiving, if we were not compliant. So that adds up to almost 2.4 million over the past 24 months that we would have forgone. Now, key thing is, these are already approved for Duxbury, so they've either been approved or we've received them. So those funds right there, those aren't at risk, that's already hay in the barn. But if we get if we want future grants of this type, these types here, we run the risk of not being eligible for them if we're not compliant. And then as part of the guidelines that the state issued, there's another one.
I did.
Yeah. Okay, well, the state issued further guidance, and there's another list of 13 grant programs that Duxbury would not be eligible for. Oh, here they are. So these are additional grants that are at risk. These are all discretionary grants that the state provides to cities and towns. And it would be at it's essentially at the granting authority's discretion as to whether or not a non-compliant community would be eligible for it. So a number of these you probably recognize, but these would be, would not be eligible to receive funds for it.
So, saw your email about the $3 million for the
Yes.
seawall, you said it was an MVP grant.
So what I said was that it was a grant, the $3 million that we recently received was from the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, EOEEA. The last bullet on this list lists the grants that are issued by that agency. And because they call it project grants, I'm assuming, we would have to confirm with the agency, but I'm assuming that 3 million would fall under that category. It's a project specific EOEEA grant that was awarded.
Thank you. So at the moment, we don't have absolute certainty that would be included, but the indications right now are that $3 million grant that we just received, we would not be eligible for that if you're not compliant. But that grant itself, we are still compliant at this point, or if you're not non-compliant, you're presumed to be compliant, which we are right now. So that grant would, we would still be eligible for that grant.
Are these one-off grants?
I'm sorry?
Steve, are these one-off grants? In other words, they come in as needed by the state?
We would apply for them. And
Apply for them. But are these dollars always in the pool, in the grant pool? Is it right now?
What do you mean?
In other words,
We have to apply for them.
We
We
have to-
happen to be awarded a $3 million grant recently for the seawall project.
I got that, it's like the compact grant, right? That's available for people to apply for every year. Are these,
Are these grants funded every year, or are these grants discretionary upon
Depends on the-
availability of
Depends on the
funds?
state budget.
Yeah. So no.
Traditionally,
The
there
answer
is,
no.
traditionally, there is funding allocated, but it all depends on what is supported within the state's budget.
The answer is no.
City ebbs and flows.
Yes,
Do
go
you
ahead.
know whether those additional 13 were added via guideline or if they were added to the statute itself?
They were not added to the statute. That was part of additional guidance that UHLC issued on their own. On their initiative.
I think before we're done with after the bridge, maybe we could circle back to your expertise as to what actually is going to be happening with the courts. As far as guideline versus whatever, not a legal opinion, but your view. So, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
So we can circle back.
Yep, we're in the final overview. Alice.
Alright, so I'm gonna discuss what you guys are voting on. What you have in front of you, you have the full zoning warrant language, these are the main points that we want to highlight. So there's a 35% impervious lot coverage maximum. 1.5 parking spots per unit. 13 units per acre at Bonji's and 17 units per acre at the Island Creek residences. There'll be a 3-story maximum at Bonji's, a 3-story maximum for mixed use, and a 4-story maximum for multifamily at Island Creek residence. There'll be no mixed use at Bonji's. 100-foot buffer, 50 of which is vegetated from abutting residences. Primary vehicle access will be Route 53 and Route 3A. And it includes support for public transportation. So while projects will go through the planning board site plan review, the planning board is obligated to support the maximum density when they receive an application. Next slide. There's an affordability component. Right now it's 10% affordability requirement. However, we've included a condition that it can increase with an economic feasibility analysis up to 20%. MAPC has agreed to do the analysis for $20,000. DAHT will provide the funding contingent on the map and bylaw being approved at the special town meeting. So this is a bird's eye view of Duxbury. We're talking about Bonji's right here and Island Creek right here. Slide. This is the existing zoning at Bonji's. So the black highlighted, the overlay that we're talking about.
We're gonna connect you,
There we go.
so
It doesn't pop right up, sorry.
there you go, okay.
Juggling a lot, right?
Carl, that means you, oh, good.
You go back to.
This one?
Yes, so this is the existing zoning at Bonji's. There's plan development one, new business district one, resident compatibility. Those will all remain. We're proposing an overlay district. Next slide. So this is the map of the overlay district. This is all multifamily. Like I said, no mixed use. It's 21 acres. The lot size minimum is 10,000 square feet. Like I said, building height is 3 stories. It's not to exceed 35 feet, the highest point of the roof. 35% maximum lot coverage, maximum density 13 dwellings per unit. Front, side, rear setbacks 50 feet, unless you're next to an abutting residence, and that's 100 feet, 50 of which is a vegetated buffer. Next slide. So this is the existing zoning at Island Creek. We have new business one in the front and resident compatibility on the side and in the back. The black is the overlay district that we're talking about. Slide. So the blue is the mixed use. The yellow is the multifamily. For the front portion, that's 5 acres, same 10,000 square foot lot size minimum, 3 stories, not to exceed 40 feet to the highest point of the roof, 35% maximum lot coverage, 12 dwellings per unit. This is a 30-foot front, side, rear setback. For the multifamily, it's about 28 acres, same lot size minimum. The building height was 4 stories, not to exceed 46 feet, 6 inches to the highest point of the roof. Same maximum lot coverage, 17 dwelling units per acre, 50 front, side, rear yard setback, with this exception of the abutting residents. Yes,
On that map, the yellow, can you sort of describe how much of that is currently developed with housing?
it's all currently developed with housing, so we don't anticipate any new development at this site.
Yes.
Where the mixed use is versus the, family.
The blue is the mixed use at the front, and then the multifamily is in the back.
The multifamily is already built.
Yeah, so it's a mixed use. I mean, not the top part of the mixed use, but the commercial buildings are there.
So is it fair to say that this is an overlay district, that you're including all of these units in the count that we're required to put?
Yes, that
So
is
there's
correct.
no additional development that's planned or proposed here.
Correct, and obviously it's up to the owners, but it's already a developed site, so we don't anticipate any further development. Until the end of the life cycle of the buildings.
And that owner doesn't have any plans submitted to the community at this time.
Correct, no plans have been submitted.
I think we're doubling down on the questioning because, you know, scuttlebutt is that there would be additional units added at Island Creek. That is, and that was contributing to the numbers to make us reach our goal. That is not true.
I believe the compliance model showed more units based on the acreage. but with the existing buildings, we don't foresee them being torn down and rebuilt from an economic perspective, but
Sure.
that's obviously up to the.
But then we would still comply with the numbers that we're required to have.
Yes, so we would be
Okay.
in compliance with this overlay district, it doesn't need to be developed, same with Bonji's can be zoned, but it doesn't need to be developed to be in compliance.
I understand that. I misunderstood about Island Creek. I thought that the additional units or some proposed additional units were part of the number that we needed to have to comply.
It is. It is.
It's an
All right, so that's what I'm trying to hear. That's what I'm trying to clear.
So
So,
our compliance model, the consultant, based on the acreage, said that there could be more units, there's potential. But
right.
that doesn't mean that that will be developed, like, we don't foresee any.
Okay, let me say this a different way. We need to have how many to comply with the statute?
750,
Okay.
5%.
All right, 750. So if indeed you have X number at Island Creek and X number potentially at Bonji's, Island Creek can stay the way it is, and then Bonji's would suffice to reach that number. In
Yes,
theory.
They could both stay exactly the way they are.
No, I'm not talking about, because I understand clearly that nobody has presented a plan or is doing it, but if we are below, if we need additional units at Island Creek, then that puts a different twist on it, right?
All we're doing is we're providing the capacity
Right.
to have this development.
Right.
And so if I understand this correctly, so what you're doing is you are identifying two sites where that capacity could occur.
So
We don't know if it will or not.
Island
but
Creek
I-
has already
but-
reached their capacity.
But no, it hasn't.
Okay,
So I guess, can I ask a different question that's
Yeah.
similar
Yeah.
to where you're heading? Based on the number of units proposed at the Bonji's site, and based on the 750 unit requirement, how many units are being counted at the Island Creek site to meet that requirement?
So Island Creek right now has 358 existing units.
Okay.
358 existing multi-family units. I don't, we don't have the exact numbers for for each of the districts, each of the sub-districts here. But of the 788 units is the 750 plus a 5% buffer. I think that's how the numbers work out. So what you do is, so if you're looking at the total unit capacity, you would start with that 788 units. And from that, you would deduct the 358 existing units.
430.
To 430, right? So that would be the total number of net new units that we would be permitting at both the Island Creek and the Bonji sites combined. So that's the total number of new units that could potentially be built.
And how many units would potentially be built at Bonji's?
And I believe the number right there.
Isn't it 258?
258 on the order. Yeah, go ahead.
I can give you the exact figures.
Great, thank you.
Bonji's is zoned 13, 21 acres, gets you to 267. This is. So that is, in terms of the capacity, maximum capacity for development in the model, 267 Bonji's. So you subtract that from 70.
So 163, we're short 163.
No, as I calculated, based on the model again, when you take the balance of that, considering that our target is 788. Because we have.
Minus 358, 430, minus 267, 163. Did you just say,
Bonji.
you
Bonji
said
was
267? 430, right?
350.
358 from 788 is 430. We all in cahoots on that? So, if you have, 267 units available to at Bonji's, is that correct?
Yes.
Then that means that we would have to have the ability to build another 163.
Yes.
So I go back to my original question, which is Island Creek met its limit or not? And if it can, yes, no, maybe so.
Yes. No, at this point, if the.
But they have vacant land,
Passed it.
but they have vacant land.
No, I don't think it's fully.
No, they have vacant land. They have land adjacent to it, I believe.
Yeah.
So somewhere we've got to find another 163 units. I'm a numbers girl. I can't envision.
What, so explain what you mean by find another 167.
Well, you need, your plan has to accommodate the ability to build another 163 units somewhere.
It does.
That's
Yes.
what we would be
That we would
permitting
not be
that
able
to be
to
built
tonight.
on the.
Right,
active side.
Robert, thank you. That's just where, I'm just trying to get it in my.
I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah,
Right, but to Allison's point, for the Island Creek site to enjoy that additional number of units, the total number that we're talking about, existing units would first have to be raised now.
or the land that they've got that's not developed would have to be
As
developed.
long as it's within
Yeah, as long as.
that yellow.
So you're not including any land that is adjacent to the developed part of Island Creek in this?
Just that, the blue and the yellow, that's it.
Which I think circles back to the original question of friend or that was. What is there any vacant land in that, and you're saying no, it's fully developed.
So I would point out here, so right here, this, can't really see it, but there's a line right here between these two parcels in the mixed use section. The one on the left here, and then this yellow parcel up here, those both belong to the Baptist church that's here. So that is not part of Island Creek, that's part of the Baptist church. So they are included, so a part of their land is included in the mixed use district.
Mhm.
And then another portion of their land is included in the multifamily district there. So it's not all Island Creek, it does include some.
But that back dog leg there without a road is, you're saying is built on?
That's a ball.
This is the bog, this is a.
Put front of the bog down, nope, keep going the other way.
This one here?
Yep.
The pork chop there?
Yep.
Yeah, I believe that's developed, that is part of.
Okay, that's all I needed
Can I
to,
ask a question?
Sure.
The Island Creek properties, are they currently 3 stories?
They have 3-story buildings and then they have 1 4-story building as well.
So let me just ask you, so based on the zoning, if I understood you correctly, if they desired to increase the number of units on that site, what we're talking about is potentially they would convert 2-story buildings into 4-story buildings, or up to.
3-story buildings.
I'm sorry, they're currently 3, so 3 into 4.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the capacity that they have right now under this, is that correct?
What we're proposing, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what, under this.
and how many acres is that land?
So the multifamily part is 28 acres, which is the yellow, the blue is 5 acres.
There are row houses there too. It's not just 3.
That could potentially, if they chose, to raise this.
They're seniors.
and convert. Just trying to understand what the potential impact might be.
These aren't trick questions, I'm really just trying to understand.
Yeah,
And
very fair.
anything that we talk about here today is just, preparation for town meeting.
That's,
All right.
absolutely.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
So we don't own this land that Bungee's owns.
Nope.
And if we do this, if we pass this, can he still do what he wants to do with that property?
Yep, so it's an overlay district, so everything that's existing remains, and he can choose between. He can even do a 40B if he wanted to, after it's passed as well, but he could use the existing overlay districts, he can use the multi-family overlay districts. Or he goes.
And if he does that, he decides not to go along with this affair, what do we do? Do we have to find, does the town have to find another, or this?
No, this is building zones for the capacity of.
No, we just
Town.
Kind of a little game we're playing now. Okay. Thank you.
So if we build on Bungee's, do we have to buy the property from the owner?
No, we're not
We're not
building.
building it.
We're not building.
Okay.
Somebody else does. Right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, my understanding is that Bungee's has been considering a 40B already.
Correct,
So this,
but nothing has been submitted.
no, nothing's been submitted, but the chances of that property being built on are pretty high regardless of.
Yes.
Do we have any idea of the number of units that they're talking about here?
They talked to Paul Kiotis. And that's why he brought this thing forward. It could be more than NBT.
That's why I'm asking.
They might-
Right, and so, and part of the, I guess part of the attraction that we have by doing the overlay at Bonji's in this way is that, again, the developer would be able to build on the Bonji site by right. So we wouldn't have to go through a 40B process with the state. It would really be, with the Duxbury, that it would be dealing.
And it will contribute to this effort,
Right.
whatever was being developed. The builder is developing this 40B, whatever, that would contribute to our unit count.
No, it would not, if a 40B development was built on this property without it being designated in the way that is being proposed right now, it wouldn't count towards, we wouldn't be in compliance with the MBTA, we wouldn't have any, it's two different types of development.
None of our existing 40Bs will count towards this number.
That's correct, right. So the point I was just getting to was that, the overlay that we're proposing, in particular here for Bonji's, it makes it more attractive to develop under the overlay proposal, part of the MBTA proposal, as opposed to the, 40B, because it's easier, he can work within the developer could work within the confines of the bylaw that we've drafted. And so that's
Versus perhaps the more rigor associated with the 40.
with the 40B, and, he would have, again, I'm saying, the developer would have the ability just to, he'd have a lot more freedom with respect to being able to bypass existing zoning regulations. With the 40B, as opposed to if you did it under this, we'd have to conform to the regulations that we have.
I see, okay, thank you.
Sure.
So that's basically the meat of what you're voting on. Tag was gonna just go over some other considerations, about infrastructure and stuff like that.
Thanks, Allison. Before I do that, I just want to comment on what Amy, you were mentioning. You used the term quota, and there is no quota. This is a requirement to lift the constraints of zoning. That's it. We're not required to build anything. There's not going to be any checkup to see whether we hit our marks. That's not what's happening.
And our land quota, the set aside designated land is a quota, so how much land we have to set aside for this zoning is what I was saying.
Now, this is more of a soft factors, but I wanted to put it up there. You'd be okay to ask questions and you can address it to the extent that we can. There are concerns of the residents, and I'll just put them on the table and move along. So there are questions about, can our water system support this? My understanding from available information is that it is sufficient as it stands. There are, of course, issues with closed wells and lots of infrastructure investments considered for that. But the impact of a couple of 300 units at the outside is something our system can absorb, particularly if we reduce what the state classifies as overuse. So that is not a material concern, in my understanding at this time. However, I have to caveat that we have not done an extensive engineering study, and there are so many factors involved in the water system that it would be quite difficult actually to pin that down and say absolutely yes or no. And in all of these things, there's this running debate about, are we, assessing the worst case or the maximum build out scenario or something less? And of course, there is no proposal on the table. We don't have a site plan, we don't have unit counts. So it's all conjecture at this point. So I caution, anyone to try and polish a crystal ball. Yes. But we can say that, we do know, of course, from our experience with our groundwater, our sole source aquifer, the septic systems represents the water risk. There's been a lot of good information generated over the summer in terms of the PFAS study, and I'm looking forward to the final results of that. And this is an engineering problem, fundamentally. And the type of septic system that's installed directly determines that risk. And there are other regulations that control that. It's not bearing on the zoning that we're considering today. One of the things that I like to be aware of is, of course, that the surface water bears on the development where we have runoff, and in a heavy rain event, you get a pulse of pollution off the land and it flows into the creeks and streams, and proximity to those surface water resources is also been a consideration as we look at the sites. Do the next slide, please. In terms of services, this is a more material conversation in terms of the budget. In particular, we know, and Mary for this, verifying that in terms of public safety, we know from our experience with Island Creek that increase in residents, especially a dense concentration of residents, raises the baseline of call rates and a number of responses and things of that nature. And it's fairly predictable, in fact. And one of the things that I wanted to try and think about as we look at this is the time factor. It's my understanding that for any large scale development of this type, it takes up to 5 or 6 years before units actually come online. So the zoning would have to pass, the design and the engineering, the perk test would have to be done. There'd have to be a whole cycle, site plan review, et cetera, before construction even began. So it's not as if this is a huge wall that's going to hit us immediately. There's questions about the student body. Are we going to have a whole bunch of new kids and build new schools? And I have an authority that no, we are not going to have to build new schools. We have capacity in the school system today, as our enrollment has been declining for quite some time. But we do know that it's likely, because there will be some growth in the student body, that there'll be growth in special services. Because this is something that we attract. We're a very education-oriented community. People come here to get a high-quality education for their students. We've also seen information, anecdotal, that this type of development, multifamily development, doesn't typically draw families with children, large families. They're more starter people who are early career or retirees who don't have children that move into these types of facilities. And then finally, there may be an issue if there are accepted streets in development, of course, with things like snow plowing and other maintenance issues with the streets. So that's really what we, try and see in terms of financial impacts. There's part of the discussion I understand with the way this was implemented is that fiscal impacts was not part of the development of the guidance, which is a gap now we find ourselves as communities having to fill. And that is, I mentioned, not part of the charge of the working group. We're coming up with a bylaw on the map and conforming with the law, and we just simply do not have the resources or time to conduct those types of in-depth studies. So finally, I'll leave with this, and this is not a fiscal or finance concern, but it's something that we should be prepared to discuss. How does this impact the actual quality of life in Duxbury for ourselves, for new residents who have moved in? And so, the primary objective of this law, and what we're trying to fulfill through the zoning, is access to public transportation, so that every single new resident doesn't have to have 1 or 2 vehicles and add that load to our streets. So walkability and access to the public transportation resources is a key concern. So we look at each location in terms of its walkability to a school or a store, or a place of worship, or an open space, the facilities that people in our community rely on to sustain our quality of life. Another factor that we considered is the location in terms of other neighborhoods. When you look at the Island Creek development, a high dense situation located directly next to the highway, try to walk from Island Creek. You can walk to Bennett's, could walk to the grocery store, as some people do, but it's very dangerous on the state highway. There is a church right there, and it's distant from the schools. And it's not near any other neighborhoods. There's not any interaction or integration of that community with the larger Duxbury community. I think that's something that needs to be taken into account from a planning perspective. And then finally, we have tried to introduce minimums and design standards that are compatible with our what we're familiar with here in Duxbury, with the style architecture, keeping the building heights lower near the street. In fact, that's one reason why multiple use development of businesses was not included in the Bonji site, because in the statute, the MBTA communities law, mixed use requires a 3-story facade, and it's on the first floor and 2 stories of residential, and we didn't think that we wanted to see 3 stories on the street, so that was really the soft factors just dispersed.
Would they be able, so if with no mixed use, then would that mean that there could be no convenience store, no drugstore, no ability for these, 200 units to have availability of getting a quart of milk or, whatever.
Yeah, well, because part of the Bungee's property is already zoned as neighborhood business, there is the opportunity to have a business there.
At Bonji's there is.
And then the Island Creek, there's mixed use in front parcels, which is currently now offices, dentists, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Carol, I just want to understand that the, public transportation access, because if it's a Bondi's location or to get to Kingston, you still need bus service or some kind of a right transportation to the location in, Independence Mall or whatever they're calling it today. Interesting.
yes, that's right. So the GATRA route does run by the Island Creek location.
Yeah.
There is no established bus line at Bungee's location, but the bylaw has language setting aside space for a bus turnout or a bus stop.
Okay.
That's what we can do.
You on the spot?
Me?
One of,
Maybe.
we're gonna get to this at some.
Only so far.
At some point here about, the idea of our extension request. And if we do that, one of the things that I would like to do is an economic feasibility study. Do you have any preliminary thoughts on the economic impact, that the Bonji site would add to this?
In terms of revenues or expenditures, or, because I think.
Whatever you'd like to start with. I've run out.
All right, so we'll go through a couple of things. I wasn't supposed to record this presentation.
I ratified in too many meetings, so I figured that.
So I did share some information with the folks from the working group, because some of these questions have been coming up in public meetings, over the last several weeks about, will we have to build a new school? Will we have to build, how are we gonna handle sewer? What, are we, my property values are going to go down, those types of things. So I did have some of our department heads work to pull some information for me in order to respond to some of these issues. This is not intended to be in any way, shape, or form a full economic impact analysis, because I think that would need to be done, but we don't know what kind of development is going to be proposed. So all of this is hypothetical in terms of tax revenue implications or things like that. However, one of the common statements that's made is if we start to talk about high density development, that we will have to build a new school. And that is an unsupported claim. So what I've done is I've gone back and taken a look through the DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education website, and their certified student enrollment annually. And this is the chart here. And you can see that our enrollment has been declining. There was a peak in 2009 of 3,288 students, but we have been steadily declining since that point. And for context, we took a look at the time period where the Island Creek complex came online. So it was started in 2017, and I'm looking at this from an assessment perspective. My question to our assessor was, when did we start capturing this development on our tax rolls? And it started in 2017 and it was completed in 2019. So if we look at the student enrollment from that time period, again, we're continuing to see that student enrollment is declining.
And, I think when you talk about the Island Creek development, I think that was the second phase of Island Creek. There was some Island Creek that was already,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right, and I believe that was 108 units that were constructed at that time.
Yep.
So that we have some perspective about.
108 additional.
108 additional that were added as a second phase, yes.
And then sometimes people forget when we talk about the school system that when students move into our community, they're not in our school district forever. So every year we graduate 250 to 300 students annually. So you need to remember that when these students, or if these students move into these units, they are not all of the same ages. So we don't get 400 kindergartners moving into a new development all at once. That's just not what happens. You may see students of various ages and grade levels that can be absorbed into existing classrooms. So there's that.
So we had
That's
another
what-
visual.
Sure. Another statement that's made frequently is my property value will go down when we start to talk about bringing these kinds of developments into the community. And again, working with our assessment data and looking at the time period where we saw the introduction of this high density development already happen in our community, we can clearly see, and we've heard the assessors talk about it every year at our tax classification hearing, that our residential property values continue to increase year over year. So there has been no dramatic adverse impact on our property values with the introduction of this high density development.
I have a question about this though, because Island Creek is kind of isolated. And so I wonder if Bonji's would impact the Autumn Ave residents in terms of property value. I know it's like a very concentrated area, but I think that was the biggest concern.
So may or may not, depends on what's developed, if anything is developed, right? So this, the analysis or an economic impact analysis might reveal that properties that are in that surrounding area only might be impacted. But in terms of the town overall, that does not appear to be the case at all.
But to follow up on Allison's comment, I'm not sure that it's, the property values would be affected only if the project was built. Because I think there's a potential for property values to be affected with the potential of something being built. If you're a homeowner that's looking at a property and you know that you have this zoning on the adjacent land, it is very well built or not could impact that value.
What we've seen, so anything's possible, right? But you gotta look at it on the order of magnitude. What we've seen year over year is that this community is highly desirable. So regardless of what has occurred in the last decade in terms of bringing in this high density development that you already have, the community continues to remain very desirable and property values continue to increase. There's also been some statements about bearing costs for sewer. So I want to remind everybody that the sewer treatment plant that we have in town services almost exclusively the school department, with some additional parcels that are located near that particular facility. But otherwise, the town does not provide townwide sewer to the rest of the community. And a development like this would require that they would have to provide their own wastewater treatment facility, just like Island Creek does. And then in terms of tax revenue, so again, without knowing what's being built, all we can do is make an assumption and look at two potentially similar developments. And so we looked at the Island Creek property and also the Kingston Collection property, which is the apartments over at the mall in Kingston. There were about 250 units over there, somewhat similar to what we have here at Island Creek. Both of those properties are valued around $50 million, slightly higher. I'm just using a $50 million mark. So with the tax rate here in Duxbury at just over $10, what that would generate is about $500,000 in tax revenue. In addition to that, we also took a look at the number of cars that are registered here in the town of Duxbury, exclusively garaged at the Island Creek properties. And that generates an additional $50,000 in motor excise tax. There's no way for me to know what the positive impact would be without an economic feasibility study. But we would anticipate that there would be positive impacts with respect to meals tax, additional people patronizing our restaurants and other facilities here in town. There would also be substantial permits associated, building permits associated with these types of developments. Those kinds of things are one-time revenues, but they would also be substantial. And then just back to police and fire. Like I said, clearly, we have heard loud and clear from police and fire that the call volume has dramatically increased and their need to respond to this high density development that we already have. They have indicated clearly that it would require additional staff at both police and fire. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, questions?
Well,
Oh,
Steve, you wanna talk about
I'm sorry, what we see on the screen right now, this is kind of important to talk about. When we did our first, public outreach, on a little over a month ago, there were a lot of questions, a lot of very good questions. They came up, but what we did was we collected all of them. Number of people wrote them down on cards, number of people, offered questions verbally. And so we recorded all of those questions, and then we've gone through, and members of the working group, and then also Stantec, our consultant, both of us combined, we answered each and every one of those questions. So you see the questions here on the left, and then the responses are on the right. We've got links where those are appropriate. So we provided pretty comprehensive answers to a lot of the questions that came up again during that first public outreach. So this is now, it's now complete, publicly available. There's a ton of really good information out here, and it answers a lot of very common questions you have about this proposal specifically, and then about the MBTA communities generally. So, please, take a look at that, read through it. A lot of really great information, and people work really, Ted and Allison, Carl's on the phone, he's on the working group, worked really hard to put these answers together, and, no, please take advantage of that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna just check to see if you're gonna touch upon the extension request and where that stands.
Sure, thank you. Not sure exactly when it was probably about 3 weeks ago. The select board, made a request to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, EOHLC, in Massachusetts. We realized that we're obviously under a pretty tight time crunch to get all of this done. And so we realized that we could do better than we're doing right now if we had additional time to be able to craft the bylaw differently, and just think more thoroughly about what we're doing. So we asked for more time to be able to do that. The letter requested an extension of the deadline from December 31st of 2024, so coming up in about 2.5 months, all the way out to December 31st of 2005, so giving us a little bit more than, they're giving us exactly an additional year. We had a call a week ago today with Chris Pletchman at EOHLC and a number of her colleagues, number of members of the working group. Tag was on there, I was on there, Brian, Mike was on there as well, and Mary, you were on. And there were other folks, I'm sorry.
Rainey.
I wasn't on there, but Randy was.
Yeah, okay.
I was not there.
Oh, okay, very good. So Rennie was on, there were others as well, where we really, put together, I think, a really strong case that went through kind of the history of how we've got to this point. We've been without a full-time planner in the town of Duxbury for an extended period of time. You might remember Chris Ryan was our last permanent professional planner that we've had here, and he left fall of 2020, so about a year ago, August, a little over a year ago. And we had one, we had Paul Halkiotis, he was in as an interim for a number of months, but his time limited. And now we have another interim planner, Rebecca Ruffley, who's joined us just a couple of weeks ago. But we've had some gaps in there where, a lot of the work that the working group has been doing would have been handled by a professional planner. So that has set us back with respect to the efforts that we're putting together for this. So that was a big part of the case that they're making to the state for an extension. We talked to them about, what we're doing. We've got the working group, we I think made the best case we possibly could. And talking with the state, they said, not the first to have requested an extension. They were very clear that they have not granted any extensions to any cities or towns that have asked for it. So they did provide us with that feedback. They said that they would get back to us within a week. We are right now at a week since they responded, so we are going to be reaching out to them and checking on the status of our request. So yeah, right.
Kind of circling back to putting, I'm gonna get him back for you here.
Thanks.
Putting Mike on the hot seat here.
Yeah.
So, I think we've all been tracking this, and, the SJC is now taking up this bill. So I guess guidelines, are they enforceable? Are they a mandate? A lot.
Yeah.
So it will take X amount of time for them to weigh in, which will have a huge impact on what cities and towns are obligated to do. So would that not allow for an extension for folks? Because, I mean, we go to special town meeting, we vote this with no takesy backsies, you know, we would have to, and all of a sudden then the SJC says, no, only kidding, that isn't how this is gonna play out. You know, I would, yeah, is that gonna impact the extension piece of it?
Yeah, and I'll start with the first part of, this is Milton versus the AG.
Right,
And so there's two big issues. One impacts us from if you're weighing things here. The AG is suggesting that in addition to taking away the grants, the AG can step in and enforce zoning upon Milton. Because for Milton and for many other towns, this statute was essentially a paper tiger. They didn't use the grants, so it wasn't for them. That's why one of the reasons why they rejected it. And in that case, the AG wants to come in and enforce the zoning themselves, or appoint a special master to do the zoning for them, go around the town meeting, go around their select board, and be essentially the enforcer of it. And that our votes at town meeting will be essentially meaningless.
So the AG is assuming a level of authority that has not been demonstrated to date.
Correct. It's the law. You break it, the attorney general can come in and enforce. That's their argument essentially. The other aspect of this is, and Brian is a little more in tune to this based on previous history. But in, I guess, layman's terms, a guideline isn't a regulation. Regulation isn't a law. And here you have a law that's very small. It says what grants you have to do this. These are the grants that will go away if you don't. What the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities has done is, instead of passing regulations that go through a more strenuous process and more community outreach and comment periods and that of that nature, they put forth guidelines that are less. They just made them, which include these deadlines, December 31st, 2024. And include now these new grants that they couldn't have the legislature add to the statute. So for about a half an hour of that argument, they spent on that idea of whether the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities went too far with their guidelines and should have done regulations, and whether they're enforceable. So that's a big question that they have to answer. The timeline on all this is the SJC has about 130 days and they can extend that too, but I think they're aware of all the towns having town meetings and things like that, and this December 31st deadline. But technically they do have 130 days from last Monday, to decide that case. There's been about 70, I think I just read online, amicus briefs in addition to the AG and the town of Milton that have weighed in on this, which is a lot. Even though some of them,
For those that did not get their Juris Doctor amicus brief,
is a friend of the court can write a brief on their own behalf. Some towns have done it, some organizations like retailers, things like that, have filed their own 2 cents on this. And that usually get like 4 or 5 on a case at most. So 70 is a lot. So they have a lot of reading. Like these arguments are supposed to be 30 minutes. It was an hour. So there's a lot for them to digest, and I think they understand the importance of that.
but if we vote at the special town meeting, I may be incorrect, but Rainey, we voted at the town meeting, the minute we vote a zoning change, it takes effect immediately, correct?
Well, yeah, it needs to have approval from the Attorney General's office first. You get
Well,
shipped up
since
there by
they're the
town
ones
clerk.
that are having a hissy fit, I would assume that they would approve the vote.
One would assume, unless there's some kind of technical reason for them not to, and then
Right.
what they'll do is if it's flawed somewhere, then they would reject that.
But for
part.
practical purposes, it's
Yeah, it's
not
pretty
as
much
though we're
effective.
voting in November and it would take effect next July.
Yeah, this isn't like that, it's right away.
Okay.
It's also, remember, this is zoning, it's amendable at any time.
That's right.
And I believe this idea about the guidelines was something that Brian raised during the meeting. I'll let him speak to that.
No, nothing to add. It was just a legal argument as to
Yeah.
whether all of these things that are supposedly enforceable really are. That's really the essence of the argument. With respect to the extension, if we do get the extension, then that takes one thing off of town meeting. Because we wouldn't go forward with it. We wouldn't ask the town meeting to vote on something we're not gonna pursue.
Mhm.
So if we do get the green light to say, you know what, take another 12 months, I think we have a compelling argument, Steve.
We do?
If they say yes, then we take it off, let the smoke clear for all these other issues, and then we'll kind of take our cue from wherever that leaves us. If we get a no, then we just proceed as we're contemplating now, the vote on the 18th. Town meeting could still say no. And again, it's a 50% vote, zoning to 2/3, but this statute says it's only a majority. And as Rainey said, it goes to the AG typically, but this particular law says it also goes to Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. You have two bureaucracies that are gonna be opining as to whether what the working group has put together, and if town meeting adopts it, either one of those departments could still say, well, you know what, in subsection A, we don't like what you did there. So this could be an iterative process, even if we give it a green light at town meeting.
And
So
would
it's
that
very
mean
confusing.
it would then provide a moratorium, if you will, or it would not be subject to issuing permits or permissions to proceed?
It's an excellent question.
We're kind of on a green field here.
Yep. But we're not alone.
Yeah,
That's the good part.
that's true.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Do we have a relationship with the other towns that are really worrying about this?
We have legal,
Yes.
Okay,
Our town council is counsel for many other communities in Massachusetts.
Procter and Goodman?
No, I would not authorize those bills. And of course, Marshfield next door voted no. So,
Yeah.
we made that point clear during the call with the state that, you know what, other towns have already voted against it. The winds are not blowing your way. Unless you wanna, and we don't wanna forecast necessarily how meeting's gonna do, but, we kind of suggested that this is probably not gonna end up where they want it to be, so help us help them type thing.
Mhm.
See where it goes.
Do we know how many towns have passed it?
We do actually.
Yeah.
Did we?
It's on the last slide.
So, okay.
If you just wanna read it, or.
Yeah, let me just put, rather than clip it. Okay, so it says half of all, half, 89 of all communities have not yet submitted their district compliance applications.
That's where we are.
2 communities are non-compliant or no action plan submitted,
That would be Milton and the town of Holden.
and 12 communities have rejected proposals, but still have time to comply.
Marshfield would be one of those, for example.
Norwell as well.
Norwell's another.
And there's a bunch coming up for votes in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
I would suggest that the AG understand culturally that in Massachusetts, we really don't like being told that we have to do something.
Let me just clarify one thing.
Home rule has existed for a reason.
One thing, and all valid points, just to keep the slings and arrows off of the working group.
No,
As-
no,
Don't worry about that.
No, I just.
They're
I
doing-
know what I-
they're doing yeoman's
clarify,
work.
Even though there's been additional helpful information about the pros and cons, this is a very unique article in that nobody's really proposing it. That it's not like we have an advocate in town saying, this is what I want
We're
from town
responding
meeting.
to something.
This has been dumped on us.
Yep.
And well, I guess the planning board is technically the proponent, so somebody's gonna need to present this at town meeting. But we're not gonna have the typical advocates versus opposition in town. This is the state saying, you gotta do this.
Right.
The working group saying, well, since we have to do something, let's do the best we can, pass this to town meeting. Town meeting will then hear, I'm sure, lots of cons, and maybe some pros, I don't know who the advocates are gonna be. And then if it's 50% plus 1, passes, otherwise we find ourselves in the column of recalcitrance,
Non-compliance.
and that might be okay. There are certainly reasons to say no. I'm not advocating that right now, but.
No,
I'm
I-
saying
I-
there's
I-
valid-
that's very-
there's valid reasons on both sides.
Yep. And please don't take any of my remarks as any
Oh, Betsy,
criticism.
I've heard worse already.
No. I'm sure you've had a lovely journey, but, you know, you've been handed a very difficult task, and we do appreciate that you have done this. Oh, poor Tag, I mean, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So I think that the working group has done a great job.
Yeah.
This, and as Brian said, this is being jammed down our throat. And the hypocrisy is that there's no affordable component to this. There's not a mandated affordable, you know, the state in one breath is saying you must, you know, comply with 20% of your, or 10% of your housing has to be affordable. Yet there's no requirement for any of this to
It's a
be
guideline.
affordable. And it just will put you further and further back from any affordable. to use the word
Quotient,
quota again, quota that, you know, is mandated by the state. So it's such a hypocritical.
I'm from the government and I'm here to help you.
That's good.
Anybody else have any questions here?
I really feel as though there's a really very basic issue underneath all of this, which is our independence. What rights do we have as a town? And suddenly the state just walks in. I mean, I sometimes think we take too much of our own money back from the state and should tell them to go to hell. Because,
No.
oh, I'm just warming up.
Oh, you little Jim.
But I mean, that's the basic issue, is that they are urbanizing the suburb. And they're forcing us to do it. And maybe it's time that towns like Milton and Holden and Duxbury say, no, we're not gonna do this. And could it hurt us? Maybe. But, you know, there's a point, there's a line in the sand.
Well, it threatens home rule.
Yeah, completely. I mean, we could forget about it.
Can I just offer a counter, or,
Sure, go for it.
so.
Come on, Mary, I like you so
I
far.
I hear what you're saying, but on the flip side, we are already subject to 40B.
Correct.
And so in some respects, what we're talking about here is a zoning proposal to try to insulate us a little bit from the impacts of 40B.
No, it doesn't.
Because it's not gonna get us any closer to 10%.
It gets us further away.
That's why I.
But we can contemplate some of the zoning requirements that are available under this overlay district.
So, yep, right. So what we've built into the bylaw is we've built in a requirement that 10% of the units that are developed, or that would be developed, 10% of those units have to be affordable at or below 80% of AMI. So that there is a kind of a baseline affordability requirement that we built in.
It'll only just keep us.
Everything that you're
status
saying,
quo.
Amy, you're absolutely right, yes. But so that will keep us treading water with our subsidized housing.
But it does not further our.
It does not make it better, that's right, which is why we're then also looking at doing the economic feasibility study.
Right.
That if that comes back, we can increase that from 10 to 20. So if we have a 20% minimum, well, now we're really talking about making progress on our SHI.
Right.
Because we're about 7.5 roughly right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so 10% kind of helps us tread water, 20% gets us real progress, so.
Ted, you raise a good point, but the former residents of the towns of Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott would probably.
Reservoir.
There you go. So the Commonwealth has a history of discontinuing municipalities and dumping them underwater. Those are the four towns.
We have a
that are
reservoir
involved.
named after.
That's right.
So I think that's what they'll tell you.
And I do feel obliged to say this because, you know, I was in lending for many years and people don't understand AMI. They don't understand. So a family of 4, 80% income is 104, 100. So it isn't subsidized. Affordable is quite different. And I feel obliged to say that every time because I think people are never really clear on what affordable actually.
That's important, Betsy, yes, yep.
And the other thing that the economic feasibility study would help us with, and I guess maybe this is more of a question than, so even if we, our feasibility study enables us to pitch for 20%. And the AG or the state allows the 20% component in this. Oh, I lost my train of thought. So didn't I read in here though that, is it a 25%? There's some trigger that. My train of thought, sorry, never mind, I'll rethink.
Yeah, it's 25%. Per units in a given rental complex would allow all the rentals to count.
Right, so only, right, that's it, for the rental, so even if it was at 20, unless it's at 25, which they're never gonna agree to, you can't count all the units under the rental.
Under the SHI.
That's exactly right.
Right, yes, that's an excellent point, though, yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's right.
There's a couple of other things about this that I'd like to just bring up. Some people are talking about 40B and 10%. The fact that the town of Duxbury is almost at the point where we've approved a housing reduction plan, if we have a housing reduction plan that's current, it works in our favor when they consider 40B applications. So it's kind of like with the MBTA communities, if this zoning is in place, it's a further indication that the town is serious about meeting the housing need, and that helps us with the status of where to go.
So part of our objective this evening is to get you guys to take a vote, to have a recommendation that's gonna be reflected in the town meeting warrant.
Ooh, stamps.
You need a vote tonight.
Why not?
Yeah, I mean,
If not, we can do it at a later meeting.
This is the only presentation that we
May
have
I,
planned, so if you have questions, I'd ask now.
Right, can,
Put it on, we can put the vote on a later meeting also.
and Rainey, I have an uncomfortableness here. You know, I talked about the economic study that hasn't been done, the idea we don't have time to do a feasibility study for affordable units. We don't have an answer on this extension. They said it could have been today.
or the court case.
We don't know about the court case, but we may not by town meeting, but
Yeah.
even for town meeting, I think it's really important to give people as much information as possible. I think we've made a good faith effort and also good faith request for an extension. I'm not prepared tonight to make a yay or nay vote on recommending it until I've seen the response from the Executive Office of Housing and Rural Communities on the extension.
We can make it available at town meeting too, we do that all the time. Whatever you guys wanna do. How many extensions have been granted today?
Zero.
Okay, let me give you the answer. first.
No, I want to see the bases.
The big change is this court case. I really think that is very impactful.
Hopefully wiped out.
Yeah, I mean, it's, so, and I think that, they would be, arrogance is the only word I can come up with, to proceed until that is settled, or not to allow for extensions, but we'll see.
I think Mike has a good point about maybe kicking the vote, because if we do get the extension, it makes
I
it
agree.
moot, so you don't need to take a stand on it.
No, we don't need to vote tonight. It's fine. I think that, everybody probably came in here predisposed with their thoughts on this, but this has been a wonderful presentation, and
Thank you.
and I feel a lot more knowledgeable on this than I had, previously, but we can wait on that. As long as it's done. Yep.
One point for me, because I.
Ask away a
seem to
question.
be missing something here, that this plan allows these two properties to be rezoned. And that's all they're asking us to do, is to rezone this so that it's an overlay or whatever.
Multi-families by right.
Okay, but it's not necessary, someone can come in there and buy that property and put one house in there.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And then we've already met our obligation.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, does the town really want affordable housing? And I think the answer is we do want more affordable housing than what we have, correct?
But this isn't affordable housing.
Well, but it's a step towards it.
No,
Is it? It's not, there's no affordable
It's
component
market
to
rate.
this at all.
Well,
that's-
10%.
10% of it would have to be affordable housing,
Right.
which is 10% more than what we're up. It just seems to me that this is an opportunity to move something in that direction. I'm not saying it's the right proposal. I want the clarification because I didn't understand why all the things that we showed up there tonight that we're hearing about why it'd be a bad scenario proved to be not a fact. So I mean, whether it be housing, water, all the different things, they're unsupported problems.
I hear you. I had the same thought.
It seems to me like, we ought to give this. It seems to me, I feel that people are leaning against this and we really got to give it a whole lot more thought than.
Yeah,
it should-
oh, I have no
should
intention of
be
asking. I
considered.
know.
Go ahead.
Betsy?
Okay,
Yeah,
so
please.
I typically look at stuff in a simple way and looking at things, we've all got a lot to do. Whether we pass this thing or not, there could well be a 40B on that property in the next 5 years,
Yes,
That's possible.
which we have no control over whatsoever.
right.
So here we are, we're gonna spend money on a feasibility study that we don't have. We're gonna spend a tremendous amount of time, once we vote this thing down with the AG,
Mhm.
stuff like that. We're gonna possibly lose some grant money, which we get, we don't get. But at the end of the day, 5 years from now, whatever we do tonight or any other night may not be any different whether we do anything or not. So I'm almost, even though I don't like the fact that they make these laws or rules that tell us we have to comply with, I don't like that. But then when you look at the bottom line and the time we have to spend to go the other way, it might be just simpler to vote it in. It's nothing's built. You gotta find a builder to go in there and accept the fact. A builder's not gonna accept 20% of it being affordable. Nobody's gonna build it.
Right.
So I'd say my personal opinion is move on, vote the thing in and go ahead and do other stuff. Get other stuff done. That's me.
One less battle we have to fight.
Yeah.
If the court case comes out.
That's why I didn't want to vote tonight, because I'm on the fence. Over which way I want to go. It's not.
And nobody is going to be able to get a permit between November and March. Not if history was any indicator of future results.
Feels good.
Wasn't there something mentioned along the way?
Thank you.
I don't
In
know.
fact, it was voted in.
Heard of a night.
The way it's written with the 10% affordable, that in the event we obtain the feasibility study, which the housing trust has money to pay for. That it could be increased even after town meeting vote to the 20%.
Yes.
We wrote the bylaws specifically to accommodate that.
So that is at least, if this does get passed at town meeting, at least it has the potential to help with the affordable housing
Yes.
issue.
Mary, I think somebody has a question on the screen.
What's that?
Somebody has a
Oh,
question on the
yes.
screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You've already been very patiently waving at me. And, I, was clueless, so I apologize. Bree, please, for the record, your name, please?
Hi, my name is Bree Ling. I'm on 1041 Union Street.
Okay, thank you, Bree.
You're
You have a
welcome.
question?
I am the chair of the Housing Authority. I also sit on the CPC as well as the Affordable Housing Trust and a couple other boards as well in town. And I did want to just put out one housing scenario where we would benefit. It's a win-win on this rezoning, is if somebody bought a one-family home and built it into a two-family home or a three-family home, we can have vouchers. We have 15 in use in town right now that would come with the family. That homeowner would get full I'm sorry, my parents talking, full rent income, and we would get 3 houses out of 1.
I'm so not following you. I am so sorry.
On these existing parcels, is that what you're talking about?
There's buildings in the existing zoning. As far as bonges and things like that, or if you go to Island Creek.
Keep existing structures, I just convert them to multi.
Tag, can you clarify? I'm,
Yeah,
agree,
well,
it's me, it's not you, but
Yeah, because the zoning essentially allows the multifamily development, it enables conversions by right, I think that's what she's.
okay.
Conversion.
So how many homes are on the Bonji's property right now? Is it just one?
Single family homes that are on the.
Several structures, and I would speak to which ones are occupied by more than one residence.
But yeah, it's unclear, if you don't know, you probably should. But.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to go back to the discussion about passing it and the implications, because there's a lot of nuance and subtlety there that helps, I think, to understand it, and to the point of, you know, if bylaw is passed, the probability that an application will be received before we get another shot at it, if we want to improve it in March, which we'll do it again, but the implication, you know, is that, you know, if we have an application under that regime, even if we change the bylaw, we are still gonna have to enforce that regime for that application. So that's what bothers me. You know, you create these discontinuities in regulation every time you change the zoning. It'd be much better to do it once than to keep tweaking it.
Unless there were a technicality in the zoning
Yeah,
that was
and
submitted to the Attorney General for review.
yeah,
that we
the
passed
question
in
has been
November.
raised because all of the towns who submit this will go through the reviews, the AG and the executive office, housing and Local communities. So we may get comments or revisions back. And the question is, if it's, you know, administrative in nature, can we just change it? Can we satisfy that? If it's substantial, what does it do to our compliance status? Apparently that puts us in a compliance at risk, where we're still considered compliant, but unless we're actively fixing it, we could become non-compliant. And then the question was raised, if we do need to make these substantial changes, do they have to go to town meeting? Yes, of course they do. So there's, it's just a lot of moving parts, but I hope that helps to understand the implications of a yes vote. And I like your comment here, or the analogy that I made at the open house, is that this is a conversation, it's a legislative conversation between the state and the towns. And it's kicked into the courts. If we choose not to be compliant with taking ourselves off the playing field and out of that conversation, and now we're in the penalty box. So where do we want to be? Do we want to be engaged and in the back and forth, or do we want to be on the sidelines paying lawyers to speak for us? That's the way I see it.
Have you, as the committee, taken a position on whether or not this should be supported or not?
We are officially and fully agnostic on this.
Yeah.
And well done. Well done, yeah, you have to be.
If I could just bring up another, it isn't part of this conversation, but it's on the periphery of this conversation, because we also have to remember that not only has the state, kind of forced the issue with this, but they also just passed a by right accessible dwelling unit statute that allows for accessory units on all properties by right. So, as much as I know JR, you're right, there is a housing, there's people that are talking about housing, the need for housing. We need to be also thinking about that as we think about these other issues as well, because that has happened.
I think one of the things that when we were doing the task force this summer, looking at revenue and looking at expenses and, the tax levy and on and on and on, in which you've had a couple of reports. One of the things that we kept circling back to is that any change in our revenue stream based on the only thing that we have, the only chip we have to cash in, which is 97% residential, is to look at our zoning and see if there is any accommodations in the zoning. That is where the conversation begins and ends for anything that would move the needle as far as revenue goes. And, you know, it's a conversation that we haven't really engaged in. We've made a number of attempts, obviously. We've had a number of zoning review boards and whatever, and we never get to the finish line. So if I don't like being told by the state what Duxbury should be or should not be, but I would welcome the conversation within Duxbury as to what we should be and should not be. That is a conversation that I think maybe will grow out of this. So it could be, you know, some good from something that has been a very unpalatable.
Right, I agree, but that accessory dwelling lot is.
Oh, yeah, we got whacked with that.
That's chip sale, so.
We did have a conversation of what the type you're talking about, Betsy, in 2017 and yielded the comprehensive plan in 2019. So we already have a book on the shelf as to what the residents of Duxbury want Duxbury to be.
Right, but unfortunately, it has stayed on the shelf.
Well, that's
Well,
not true. That's-
Somewhat.
One goal
Yeah.
this year is for implementation.
Right, the zoning, as far as zoning goes, it is, we haven't really, haven't brought to fruition rewriting the zoning or codifying it or making
True.
sense of it in some aspects. And, you know, and is that because we don't have the personnel at town hall? Partially it's manpower. People have full-time jobs, and that's another full-time job that they cannot embrace. And, you know, this could, you know, highlight that. Because it looks as though if we don't do it for ourselves, that eventually Big Brother's gonna do it for us.
Happening right before our eyes.
Yep.
Madam Chair, are we going to try to go over the rest of the warrant articles tonight?
We can if you want.
If so, can we move on at this point?
Yep,
Try to
we
get to
can.
those?
We can, these fine folks can go home.
Yes, thank you very much. You guys did a great job.
Rainey, hit us.
So Article 2 is the proposed acceptance of Cooper Hill Road as a town way. And to help facilitate and accelerate, I'm gonna just read you the explanations because they are not self-explanatory. This article was previously presented to the voters as Article 23 of the warrant last annual town meeting on March 9th, at which time the select board and finance committee both unanimously recommended its approval. In fact, town meeting approved Article 23 with a vote of 78 yes and 14 no, thereby meeting the requisite 2/3 vote for passage. The town is required to acquire state rights, to acquire rights in Cooper Hill Road within 120 days from its town meeting vote. Due to various issues, the street acceptance process was not completed by July. Those issues have now been addressed and and the town is now ready to complete the street acceptance process, which requires town meeting to vote on the layout and accept the road anew. The explanation for the March town meeting the March town meeting stated as follows: in April of 2023, the town received a request from the developer, Mr. Kevin Sealand, asking the town to accept Cooper Hill Road as a town way. After extensive review by both the select board and the planning board, it was determined that Cooper Hill Road was constructed in accordance with Mass General Law and the planning board's rules and regulations governing roadway construction. This article has met all of the statutory filing deadlines and as such is being presented to the voters for their consideration. Cooper Hill Road was designed and built in strict compliance with the subdivision rules, regulations, and specifications for the construction of a public roadway with the intention to request town acceptance. No waivers or deviations from such requirements were granted and therefore is eligible for acceptance by the town. Positive vote will allow the select board to make Cooper Hill Road a town way. Basically, we're revisiting an article that had already been approved, only because of a technical glitch in the law. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Betsy, we can make a vote on that.
Would you like to vote on it, everybody?
Yeah, I believe if we did.
Can I have a
Yes,
motion,
yes.
please, friend?
I move that we accept Article number 2, proposed acceptance of Cooper Hill Road as a town way.
I second that. Sorry.
JR second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, Oh, sorry, we have to do roll call. Chuck,
Sorry.
I'm in favor.
Chuck, I can't see it on there. Sean? Aye. Al?
Aye.
Fred? Yep,
Aye.
yep, yep.
Aye.
Aye, aye. Okay, Nat?
Aye.
Okay. Yeah,
All right, now it's our turn.
7-0.
okay.
Let's vote now. I move that the select board support and recommend the approval of the November 18, 2024 special town meeting, article number 2, regarding the proposed acceptance of Cooper Hill Road as a town way as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. Okay, Harbor Walk easement. The Duxbury Rural Historical Society is offering to grant the town a non-exclusive pedestrian access easement. By the way, there's a picture of it on page 22. On a portion of their property located at 479 Washington Street, located at the corner of Washington Street and Mattakesett Court, be known as the Harbor Walk. Proposed easement is for a 10-foot wide parcel that would run along their southern property border between Washington Street and the harbor parking lot, measuring 200 plus or minus 200 feet east to west. The society proposes to construct an open walkway to provide pedestrian access from Washington Street to the Snug Harbor public parking area that would provide a safe alternative to the narrow Mattakesett Court roadway, which has no sidewalks and experiences heavy boat trailer traffic. The society would cover the expenses for the initial clearing and construction of the surface fencing. The town would assume responsibility for the ongoing maintenance, including future upgrades of the harbor walk and upgrading as needed in the future. And just in case anybody should ask who will build it initially, the DPW has already said that they do not have the capacity to do so. So it would be up to the society to construct the path for the easement.
Any
And after
feeling
that, we will
about
take
what
it.
maintenance would be cost or upkeep?
Maybe laying down gravel in the future or whatever the surface becomes, weeding
Hopefully
it.
not gravel.
Yeah, whatever the surface becomes, we would have to maintain that.
Yes, compliant.
The
Will it
minimums.
be ADA?
Yeah, it has to be ADA, so.
There will be like trash removal, there will be some maintenance, and
Yeah.
depending on what kind of vegetation's planted along there, there will be some.
Right now it's grass. So, but we take care of whatever it is. That's not a heavy lift.
Has anybody ever gotten run down, going down to Mattakesett Court?
It's bumper tag, honey.
There've been accidents at the end of the walk.
Yeah,
I think
it's tight.
This is a really
having
nice.
some experience in the area, I think it's something.
been there?
indeed.
I agree, it was a nice proposal, it really,
Yeah, I
I think
think-
it'll really improve,
And
I
I
feel that.
I know Jake's not here to speak for himself, but he is wholly
All
supportive
for it.
of this because of the safety issues.
Yeah, it gets people away from walking down Mattakesett Court, especially in say.
Chuck and I
July.
did speak to Jane about this, and he is supportive of this, and
Oh, yeah.
is grateful that they've made this proposal.
Prepare for a motion.
Yep, waiting for it. Go ahead.
I move Article 3, Harbor Walk easement for income approval.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, let's do a roll call. Chuck?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Al?
Aye.
Fair?
Friend, aye. Aye.
Betsy, aye. Nat?
Nat, aye.
7-0-0.
I move the select board support and recommend the approval of the November 18, 2024 special town meeting. Number Article 3, Harbor Walk easement as presented.
Catherine's not here.
All those, aye. All those in favor?
Aye.
Where the numbers go.
Thank you all. So for Article 4,
Yeah, and the numbers.
the addition, it's entitled Additional Department of Public Works Facility Bonding. I'm passing around a memo that I'm going to refer to, which is something I had presented. Which is something I had presented to the board back in September. So Article 4 refers to what I'm about to read to you. Again, it's a memo regarding special town meeting proposed at this point, they're proposed, now they're here. Town meeting articles, so. Back in September, I suggested to the board that in advance of the upcoming November 18th, 2024 special town meeting, 2 proposed warrant articles are contemplated herein that present a unique opportunity for the town of Duxbury. As you will recall, in March of 2022, both Article 11 and the associated ballot question were approved by the voters to fund the DPW building project in the amount of $26,400,000. As you will also recall, in March of 2023, both Article 13 and the associated ballot question were approved by the voters to fund the seawall construction project in the amount of $20 million. Since that time, we have gone out to bid for both projects. For a number of reasons, primarily post-COVID era inflation, the June 2024 DPW building projects came in higher than had been anticipated. A breakdown of the low bid received is noted below. Read that if you need. Since June, the DPW Building Committee has reduced the scope of the building size from 37,700 square feet to 30,600 square feet for a reduction of 3,100 square feet. In addition, we have identified over 20 cost control measures to reduce the cost of the project. We are still working on identifying an additional $600,000 in savings to get us down to the original appropriation. Before going out to bid again, we will again go through the independent cost estimator to confirm that the savings identified are representative of current market conditions. As for the seawall, the bids for that project came in at $5 million lower than anticipated, with the two lowest bids coming in at $13,000,004 and $14.4. At the bid opening, Paul Brogdon made an interesting comment that had me thinking about it for quite a while. To paraphrase, it'd be nice to be able to apply a portion of the seawall project funding to the DPW project, and maybe we could have the ability to add back in some of the things we have had to cut. In my conversations with our design engineer for the seawall, once the bids had been open, he advised me that he would be comfortable with a total seawall project in the amount of $15 million, which would still leave an ample amount of funding for any unforeseen circumstance. I'll just add here, because I haven't finished the full explanation. We did go with the second number, which is the 14.4. So we do have a seawall project, contracts are signed, that's under $15 million. After consultation and discussion with town council, the finance director, the engineers for both projects, and the Department of Revenue, it turns out that not only is this an idea that can actually happen, but it is also widely supported. Essentially, since the town has already received authorization from the voters to debt exclude the amounts necessary to pay for both the seawall and the DPW project, this action necessary now is simply an amendment to the votes taken on those two articles. The proposed articles would amend the borrowing authorization by reducing one and increasing the other, and since the voters have already approved both ballot questions, a special election would not be required, and only a vote on the two articles to amend, which would require a 2/3 majority to authorize the borrowing. If the voters were to approve the authorization of the $5 million from the seawall project to be used for the DPW building project at town meeting, the vote would have the potential to construct a building modified or slightly reduced from the initial proposal, include some of the bid alternate options, and prevent some additional reductions to the project that could diminish the overall programming objective. Also, with regard to the material, this was another parenthetical discussion that we were having on this subject. The sand that will eventually come from the excavation, the DPW site, we've been working with DBR on a solution for storage of that material on their property, which would ultimately be used for beach nourishment in front of the seawall. There are still a number of variables that are working through. Once we have additional information on that project, I'll be sure to provide the board with an update. And the two draft articles were included below, but in fact, what you have now instead are the actual articles themselves, both of which have been reviewed and approved by town council and bond council and UR. So these are for your contemplation. Basically, what happened is I used the ridiculous analogy of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. One bowl of porridge was too cold, first bid. One bowl of porridge was too hot, small bid, and then one bowl of porridge could be just right if we did it this way. So basically what we're doing is rolling maybe $5 million from one project into another.
Capacity. $5 million of capacity.
Capacity, yes. There is no money, only a little bit of money has been spent on the seawall to date, but not full. Please.
Fred?
In addition to the second bid, which you accepted of $14,486,000, with a little bit of wiggle room to 15 million, there's also contingency built into that as well.
That is correct.
So there's contingency plus that little wiggle.
Plus the cushion.
Two, have you taken a look at, if we just didn't do this and didn't borrow $5 million,
Yes.
it would have an impact on the taxpayers of Duxbury. Is there any sense for what $5 million would mean to the individual? When we passed these at town meeting, we told people this is the impact on the average tax bill. Is there a sense for what that $5 million that we're not saving,
Debt exclusion.
what the savings could potentially be to the individual home?
Sure.
I have it,
I don't have
it's a
it.
pretty small number,
Yeah, I would suspect. I don't have it on with me.
but it would be helpful to have, because if it comes up at town meeting,
Understood.
people are gonna ask, well, gee, I could have gone out to dinner or something, and I don't even think we'll cover dinner.
And I should add, we are going out to bid. We will have a definitive number by the time we walk into
That was
town
my
meeting.
third question. You talked about that the other day. You haven't
We
got
will
the
have,
final bid yet.
no, we'll have the bid results for the whole package, so we'll know exactly what to ask for on November 13th.
I thought we were gonna hold off on any recommendation until we receive that number. That
You
was my
can, you
understanding.
certainly can. In fact, I thank you for reminding me.
I
Feel free to do
believe
that.
that was how we left it
Yep.
at our meeting.
So we will get that before town meeting.
Absolutely.
So we may not take a vote then until
Town meeting morning.
to recommend.
But we've done that before too. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. And, yep. So
I think it's important to have the conversation though, because I think that, unlike many other articles that are a yay or nay based on the, end result, I think this is more a comfortable, you know, are we comfortable with reallocating funds to a different project? Because in the long term, it's a better decision for the community. That's the
And to
conversation.
Amy's point, you're gonna have a real number as opposed to an abstract.
Yes, and a real number would be valuable on that,
Yeah.
but I think that the conversation starting now is not inappropriate because it's more of, are you comfortable with the process?
Yeah, that was why,
That's equal to the number.
that was why.
And that's okay. I mean, whether you are or you're not, I'm not making a value
Are we
judgment on
gonna
that.
have that, are you wanting to, we should have this conversation now is what?
Well, no, I think you need to be having that when you've got your full board, but I mean, I'm just saying now, if anybody here has,
We have had that conversation. I'm not comfortable, I mean, it's not consistent with the past. With historic practice in this town, but I understand it is an option, that is being put forth to the residents, they're the governing body and.
choice, yeah.
I'm in favor of, you know, there was a big savings on the seawall and I'd like to see the residents enjoy that savings. I think this is a little bit squishy for me, but that's me, so I'll start the conversation.
Sure. Any questions on,
We're not gonna vote on this.
no, we're not gonna vote on it. I just want, you know,
Any other questions?
are there any other questions that need, you know, to help you think about it over the course before we do vote on it tonight? Rainey's here to answer, so I think we all need a minute. We just need a minute.
Understood, yeah. We'll do it.
One of the things that I would like to know is the cost of delay. I mean, it is, the only certainty in this is that we need a new DPW facility.
Mhm.
That building is falling down. That's been determined, that has been supported by the community. It's kind of a no-brainer. So one of the factors that I would like to know is what is the cost of saying no? Because we don't have enough money in the bond, we don't have enough money that we've appropriated to proceed. So how much will it cost us to restart? Because we started this in, what was it, 15 or 16, and it was gonna be 19 million. Then we bounced ahead and it was gonna be 21 million. And now here we are in 24 and it's 26 million. So if we spend another 2 years waiting for the place to blow over, is it gonna be 32 million?
Well,
And that's, and I know that that's kind of an impossible question, but I think from the many people that you've worked with, never mind the hours that the staff at town hall has put into this and meet on a weekly basis, and that costs us money, their time. I wanna know the price tag in going forward, and I wanna know the price tag in delay.
Well, and I would love to know those numbers too, I'm with you. But one of the things that we've been told by the consultants and why it's gone out to bid several different times is that they were expecting some correction with the cost of materials and the cost of certain things, which they were hoping to get. Whether that is in fact ever gonna happen or not is a good question.
I did construction lending for 30 years. I've never really seen it come down.
And it didn't here either.
No, it might level. But once a vendor or has the ability to charge X amount, I mean, there's a couple of exceptions.
COVID kind of.
COVID, with a couple of pieces from COVID, but I don't think you're going to see a serious decline. But that's just my opinion.
I will tell you, and the board already knows this, the DPW consultants coming in to do a presentation, sort of an update on October 21st. Attend, tune in, launch, we'll have the whole thing there. Kind of give us an update, because at this point, the project is going through the estimator, the independent third-party estimator, to figure out how close we are in terms of what the engineer has estimated.
But a cost of starting again. I want to know what that cost price tag is.
I know.
Because I think it's,
Yeah, because we're about $1.5 million to do it now,
right.
with just all the engineering and design we've done so far.
I think you already know, it's gonna be 32 million.
Oh, that was my guess, but
I'll ask
I'm
if we
not
can calculate
clairvoyant,
that
so.
cost.
Anyway, stay tuned, film at 11. And I agree with you. I don't like it either, but I'd rather not spend another $4 million on the building. I can avoid it.
So as I said, one project goes up, the other goes down. So in this case, Article 4 handles with the price of the DPW project going up. And Article 5 is the seawall, which would have that total project dollar amount going down from 20 to 15 million. You gotta do one first and then the other. So this is the subsequent order. So it all relates back to this memo. And I'll be further expanding the explanations in there. So that's, you do one first and then the other.
And number 5 would then be a continuation of 4.
Yeah, you gotta do 4 first, then you do 5.
Okay,
I think there's a question in the audience.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. Can I just ask a
Oops.
question, Betsy?
Hey, how are you?
I do this at you. Alicia Babcock, Ocean Roadside. I just had a question about this article. I think like you kind of conflicted about how I would potentially vote for this, because I know how badly we need the DPW. But, I also know how much work it was, kind of trying to convince everybody, including people in this room, to vote for the seawall and try to appropriate that amount of money. And it was a tremendous amount of work. And I feel like we did promise the voters that we would reduce this project as much as possible. And then now we've got a $3 million grant on top of it. So we've gone from 20, now we're down to 12. And I don't know about you, but I feel really good about that. And I kind of agree with Amy, it does feel a little bit like a switcheroo to me, and I don't really love how that feels. And so instead of entangling the two projects, is there a way that we could still achieve the same thing, but separate it out in a way we just put a separate article for the DPW building, and just be honest with everyone and present it the way that it is, and just say, listen, we got really fortunate with this other project. And, we're in a position now where we'd like to come back to you and ask you for, X, this is now what it costs, and maybe we could just ask you for, kind of like bring the DPW article back again.
We had
Separately.
discussed that with the board in June after we got the bids back, when they came in at 29 million. And there was no appetite for going back to the voters to ask them for more money for the project. That was discussed.
Right.
The board said-
At that time, though, that this wasn't contemplated, so, at that time, we certainly had no
Yeah.
idea that we would find ourselves in this situation.
Right,
Right.
of course.
But that's why I want to know what it would cost to start again, because doing that, we'd start again.
Right, and then would that have to get kicked to the spring, or could we put it in an article?
Well, no, I mean, it would have to start again. I mean, you would have to revote it, you'd have to, at town meeting, at the ballot, and you would also.
No,
We have authorization for 26.
No, she's saying if you separated it and you just redid the DPW.
we could build a
We
building.
asked you to ask me to do that. All this article is doing is asking for additional funding in the DPW article. That's it.
Right.
Oh, I see what you're saying, Mary. You're right.
We're not starting from ground zero at all. Article 4 is asking for additional funding for the DPW project, period.
Okay.
Article 5 is demonstrating our commitment to the community that we're gonna reduce the borrowing authorization in alignment with the reduction in the cost of the project. That's it.
So where does the, transfer, so to speak? Does 5 million?
There is no physical transfer.
No,
It is. The community has supported $46.4 million worth of investment. We are staying within that $46.4 million worth of investment. We just need to spend additional funding on one of them and less funding on the other. And the only way that we can spend additional funding on one of them is to pass Article 4.
So we're not saying we're gonna take money, we're gonna transfer these funds, you are separate. It has become separate from, I think, the original conversation when I looked at this. So right, I thought it was a transfer, if you will, instead of.
You described it better than I did.
They are two totally separate capital projects. Totally separate. And the idea is that the community, through a lot of effort, by proposing these two projects, the community has ultimately supported $46.4 million worth of investment. And we've now got these two projects where one is going to cost us less and one is going to cost us more. We are asking you to allow us to have an additional appropriation to complete the DPW project.
We're kicking that can though, right now, right?
What do you mean?
Just waiting for the bid. Right?
Yes.
So
What do you mean?
why can't we do
What
Article
do you
What do
5?
you mean
There's
kicking?
no can that's been kicked, we're just waiting to get the number so we know how much that's for.
So why can't we do Article 5? We know the reduction is happening. Why do we need to?
You mean vote it what, tonight?
Yeah.
Just vote, yeah.
Because some people would feel more comfortable if they knew the exact number.
No, we do know the
Talking
exact
about
number.
the
Of
rescission
what,
of the
what would be borrowed.
borrowing.
We know the number for the seawall. We could vote to reduce, yeah, but it begs the issue. I mean, that's a no-brainer. I mean, so. Yeah.
But I think it's a community perception component right now where the seawall being dropped down to a 12 million. I think that's what needs to be.
Okay, let's
We
be
don't have
careful
a
then.
grant, it's 15.
15,
Yeah.
that's what the community wants to be able to have an opportunity to celebrate. Understanding the inside working of there are two projects and the reduction of one allows for an ask of the town for another. I think that's just showing a little bit more of the inside baseball of how we're dealing with finances for it. But I think it's being able to separate, like, this is a win for the town, the seawall of coming in $5 million lower. So I think the further that we can separate Article 4 and 5 from being a connected piece, I think that's what's gonna really be the best approach.
I agree.
No, I don't have a vote on this, but it's very clear to me that one article is asking us to approve an increase in the cost of the DPW building, and the other article is congratulating the seawall group for coming in with bids that are lower than what we approved, period.
Yeah, it is that simple.
But Article 6. So Article 4, if we're starting there and what we're only describing is that we're looking for more money.
Well, we're gonna tell them. They're gonna be able to read Article 5. We're not gonna keep it secret.
The other way around.
Yeah, I mean, but they won't necessarily have voted, or some people won't, in theory, know that we've got $5 million coming back to us.
Sure they will. We'll discuss that when we present the article.
Yes?
Yeah, so, I mean, that is absolutely gonna be discussed. These, many times, financial articles will be in tandem, if you will.
Well,
And they're codependents, and this will, and so you discuss it before.
There's, I need to make sure that is.
Yeah, well, yeah. Rainey, I shouldn't speak for you. I mean, I would know from our point of view that codependence would be up front and center, because that's the way it was written. But I get what Mary's saying. It really isn't. We've already agreed to financing $46.4 million for capital improvements. Seawall and DPW. And now this is a reallocation of those funds.
What the articles do not say is that.
Kind of,
That,
you don't like that, I know you don't like that, but that's the only thing that makes sense in my head.
That's easy, if I could make a comment?
Yes, please,
All
Al.
right. What the article does not say is that this is merely an authorization. If you think about it from a bonding point of view, the point is the total for both projects is 46. Now what you're doing is you're shifting the authorization within that 46. That's the sum of substance.
That's where I get uncomfortable. That's where I don't like it. I much prefer two separate articles, two separate issues. The seawall was a win. We're giving back money to the taxpayers because we saved money. Unfortunately, the DPW, we're still struggling, so, we're asking for more money there, and the voters can decide one way or the other.
Well, you can change the verbiage in the article.
It did change, because I do
No, I
think
think it changed the
originally
verbiage
it
that's
it
from
was
us today.
intertwined, and I
No, this has
agree.
been approved by council and bond
Okay.
council.
But you're right, because that was the original conversation, but it seems like it has been separated and I think much more clear, and, I'm more comfortable with it as two separate issues.
As it is.
As it is.
Yeah, which they are. Remember, this was written on September 4th. The idea came to me on September, this is written on September 5th. The idea came to me on September 4th. So I ran to the board as fast as I could, because I wanted to get it out there.
It was very transparent of you and
Thank you. That was the whole idea. Like, oh my God, I was on the phone on the way to pick up my kids at 6:30. I'm talking to Jeff Blake, and I'm like, hey, dude, I got this idea. What do you think? He's like, well, that might work. Talked to Mary, we ran around the room.
very transparent.
But ultimately, I think we're in favor of doing
Both projects.
both projects.
Yes.
Right.
We've already got, the town's told us to
Okay,
do both projects.
And
Okay.
this would allow us
But
to do
it
that.
doesn't say that, then why can't we vote on it then?
Because we want it. I know, what I'm
Some
waiting
people
for with
wanna
the
wait and see
DPW
what
is
the
what
bid
those numbers are
Oh,
gonna
okay.
come in at.
It might be less
And
than five.
maybe we don't need the five.
Yeah, I see, okay,
Maybe it's
okay.
less than that. or-
Oh,
Well,
We'll need every penny.
I love how you're thinking.
Come on, Ray.
But I love it. But back in July, I got the bill.
no, I don't,
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
How about Article
Great.
6?
Article 6.
I think that we will probably go forward with that vote in
Okay.
short order, but not to.
Are we voting on?
All right, can I take up one that we might be able to vote on?
Yeah.
6.
Mary, this is all yours, pal.
Article 6, what we're proposing is to add an additional revolving fund to the existing set of revolving funds that the town currently operates. This revolving fund is intended to be for the electric vehicle charging stations. I will be before the select board on the 21st of October in a public hearing proposing that we institute fees for electric vehicle charging stations located here in town. This revolving fund would be the mechanism into which we would deposit the revenue that is received from those charging stations in order to pay the bills associated with those charging stations.
Thank God.
Could that go into effect immediately on passage from town meeting?
So the revolving fund will be established, so the fee structure has to be adopted and we have to implement it.
Yeah,
So yes, assuming that the fee structure that I'm gonna propose to the board in 2 weeks or a week, assuming that that passes through the public hearing process and this passes, then yes, it will be instituted immediately.
great.
Can I ask a question about this? It's my understanding that the cost to charge on charge point is not a lot for any person that utilizes I haven't done it, but I hear it's only, $2. So do we know how much this is costing?
We do, and I'm gonna present that all to the board on the 21st of October.
Okay, because it would be good to know what it costs, because to monitor it and to set up a payment system is gonna be a cost. So I just wanna make sure.
I'm gonna cover all of that. That's not what the issue is here this evening. The issue is just to establish the vehicle for us to deposit revenues and pay the bills for the revolving.
I would love to take a vote on that.
I move Article 6, put my glasses back on. Establishment of revolving fund to be used for electric vehicle charging stations.
And I second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Chuck, aye.
John, I.
Al, I,
JRI.
Friend, I.
Ted, aye.
Betsy, aye.
Nat, I.
Okey dokey. 800.
Article 7 is a.
No, we have a vote over here too.
Oh, are you gonna take it before the senior?
You might want to
Okay.
hold off on the.
You're gonna get a presentation. We've heard it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're gonna take a vote on number 5.
Yeah,
There you go.
5?
yeah, you guys skipped 5. We're gonna vote on 5.
Well, if
Okay.
you're gonna vote on 5, we're gonna vote on 4 and 5.
That's fine. I move the select board support and recommend the approval of the November 18th, 2024 special town meeting. Article number 5 regarding amendment to the borrowing authorization for funding of engineering, design, permitting, and construction of the Duxbury Beach seawall as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye. And skip 6.
Do
7.
we want to do 5 in light
Um,
of that?
I
Would you like-
want to ask the committee,
Okay.
do you want to vote on 4 and 5 now, or do you want to wait? Do you need additional information, or are you satisfied?
See what the,
I'd wait on 4, but I'm comfortable voting on 5.
I'm good to go for both.
Okay, and Sean, what did you say, love?
I would like to wait for the numbers back for 4, but I'm comfortable voting on 5.
Okay, and so would JR, so that's fine, we can wait. Anybody want to vote on 5?
Yes. Sure, why don't we
Yeah,
vote
5.
5?
All right,
Yep.
friend,
Okay, I move that the finance committee approve, excuse me, I move Article 5. Amendment to the borrowing and authorization for the funding of engineering, design, permitting, and construction of the Duxbury Beach seawall.
second.
okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Chuck,
Chuck, aye.
start it up.
John, I.
Al, I.
JRI.
Friend, I. Ted, I.
Let's see, aye, Nat,
Nat, I.
okay, 800. So we're still waiting on 4 for the numbers. And, so that leaves 1 and
Article 7.
4 outstanding. Okay, Article 7, what do we got?
Article 7 is a proposed change to an existing revolving fund for the senior center, and the change is to increase the annual allowable expenditure limit from $175,000 up to $400,000. The reason for this is the popularity of the programs that are conducted here at the senior center. The senior center has surpassed the limitation of $175,000 annually.
Good for them. huh?
Yep, so I'm asking for an increase in the revolving fund.
If I could just add, in support of that, I'm the liaison to the Council on Aging, and not only do I get a book every month that I couldn't do all of the things in a day that they do here in a day. And I try to visit frequently, and this place is always busy with folks coming, going, tons of programs. It's just an amazing facility, amazing program. We have terrific staff and volunteers. And I'm surprised it's only 400, frankly, with all the stuff that they do. And the Friends do a terrific job in providing funding as well. So I strongly support this request.
Well, that covers your team.
Yeah,
Now, back to my team.
go right ahead.
All right, do I have a motion?
Fair?
Do we
Okay.
want to vote
Great.
all 3 or at the same time, or
We're only voting.
No,
you're only doing the one? Okay, great. So,
I move
Motion,
Article
please.
7, general bylaw amendment, proposed change in expenditure limits to the senior center revolving funds. Increase from 175,000 to 400,000.
And I second that.
any further discussion? All those in favor? Chuck?
Chuck, aye.
Sean, I.
Al, I.
JRI.
Friend, I.
Theodore, I.
Betsy, aye. Nat?
Nat, I.
Okay, 800. Great.
Yeah, can I just ask a question on it first, just because these are expenditures, so I'm assuming, and then you'll probably give a presentation, or we'll get a presentation from the senior center that shows that that these programs that they're expending money on are being covered by revenue to take,
So-
participate in programs or.
I'm not intending to do a presentation on it. The very nature of the fact that these are revolving funds, speaks to that fact. They only pay for their programs based on the revenue that they receive. So a revolving fund is intended to take in fees for a program into the fund and use those fees to pay for the cost of the program.
Money in, money out.
Thank you.
Mary, do you know what the balance with the total amount of that fund is on a daily basis?
It fluctuates.
More than 400,000, I hope.
No,
Oh,
no, better not be. What it's what they taking in is what they should be ideally utilizing. There should be a balance in the fund in order to deal with some administrative costs and future costs and improvements, but it shouldn't be to that level.
But they do get vacation travel through vacations, and that'll be very expensive.
Money in, money out.
It's money in, money out.
All right, I move the select board support and recommend the approval of the November 18, 2024 special town meeting, article number 7. Regarding general bylaw amendment, proposed change in expenditure limits to senior center revolving funds from $175,000 to $400,000 as presented.
Second. All those in favor? Aye.
Great.
Okay, Article 8, I'm going to table for the discussion on that for this evening because I'm not prepared for that one yet. Article 9, straightforward unpaid bills. They were expenses of a previous fiscal year. And we need authorization to pay the vendors for the services and goods that they have rendered.
I think that's a pretty straightforward article. You see it often. I'd like to move Article 9, unpaid bills, in total amount of 13,000. Pardon?
I'm sorry.
Article 9, unpaid bills in the total amount of 13,565.18.
I second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Chuck, want to
Chuck,
start
aye.
us off?
Sean, I.
Al, aye.
Yeah, aye.
Friend, aye.
Glenn, aye.
Betsy, aye. Nat?
Nat, aye.
Okay.
I move the select board support and recommend the approval of the November 18, 2024 special town meeting, article number 9, regarding unpaid bills as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That,
Why do you read that right there? Just, is it said the 9/10 vote?
Yes.
yes, because it's a special town meeting.
Unpaid bills.
It's 4/5 at an annual and 9/10 at a special.
I would jinx you had it if I told you, but I've never seen it not.
Okay, that concludes the finance committee's
Agenda.
Go home there.
Thank you all. That was awesome.
You guys need to adjourn.
Your motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
We're out.